Hello everyone, another nice day. Hope you're fine. And I am here once again. Yes, I am here once again to have this particular topic, and that is developing ELT materials. We know what do we mean by ELT. That means English language teaching. So we can refer ELT as English language teachers, English language teaching, English language training in some sort of uh, definitions will tell you so, abbreviations will tell you so, but mainly ELT refers to English language teaching. So whenever you would like to develop material uh, for a teaching context, so what should you do, what will be the framework of that material, and how will you do that? We will have a brief discussion. Okay, in some sort it is a descriptive discussion in this slide. So what I want from you is that don't take much stress on it, because as a teacher I am considering you as a teacher because you are doing this particular course, methods and materials of teaching English, as a part of teaching teacher trainer. So I said it earlier that I consider you as a future teacher, and the teacher always takes stress from part of the students. Okay, I know some of you might not agree with me, but if somehow you become a teacher, then you will understand. But let's not talk about those issues. Let's talk about today's topic. We are having developing ELT materials, and I have taken information from Brian Tomlinson, the book edited by Brian Tomlinson, McDonald, Shaw, and Mashura, and different sources. And I, Muhammad Nasim Firdaus, would like to welcome you in today's slide narration. And definitely these slides are prepared by me. So let's start with our contents. What will be our contents for today's narration? First, we will look at materials development, though we have already looked at materials development, but we will have a detailed look today. And then we'll look at the implications of materials writing. So why should we develop a material? We look at that. And then the framework. This is one of our key issues for this narration. And then we'll go to the process of material writing. So it is a complementary. For example, if you start with the framework, definitely it will take you to the process. And the attraction center is in here, developing digital language learning materials. For example, we can give an example of today's class. I have developed this particular material for you for not teaching English, but to share information about developing ELT materials. But as a teacher, as an English language teacher, you will develop your material to teach your students English language. And whenever you will do that in a digital platform, then we are talking about these things, developing digital language learning materials. So okay, let's start with the material development. Material development is both a field of study and a practical undertaking. As a field, it studies the principles and procedures of the design, implementation, and evaluation of language teaching materials. Tomlinson 2001. So look at these major two issues whenever we are talking about developing a material. The number is, it is a field of study, and second one is a practical undertaking. First, we need to understand about this particular section is material, and then we also need to understand its practical implication, because in ELT courses, or when I should say, whenever you will be developing yourself as a teacher, you will have both issues. You will have theoretical issues and you will have practical undertaking as well. First, you need to identify, you need to understand how to do that, what are the theories to produce materials or to develop materials. Then you need to establish it, you need to practice it in real life situation. And by having the combination of both, you can have your original material which is going to work in your classroom. So that's why you need to have focus on both of the issues. Richards in 2001 referred that the author is generally concerned to produce a text that teachers will find innovative, creative, relevant to the learner's needs, and that they will enjoy teaching from. The publisher is primarily motivated by financial success. Okay, we have two perspectives. First one is from the author's perspective, and second one is the publisher's perspective. Now, whenever we are referring as the author, we already know that the author could be only the writer, because he or she has specialty and experience about writing, and he or she knows what to write, how to organize. But whenever the author and the teacher will be the same person, then it will be a little bit different, because the teacher will use his or her practical classroom experience for developing the material. So that's why you will find innovation, creativity, and very relevant to the learner's needs in that material. So that will you do. So mainly we have three perspective from the genuine author, who is only author, and then the author who is also a teacher, and the publisher. So here is the model. So of course it is cited in Tomlinson. According to Johnson, what will be how will be an experienced material writer, what he or she will do. But before that, Richard says that 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. So in order to be a material development, only 10% is inspiration, 90% this 90% is all about perspiration. So according to Johnson, if you want to be experienced material writer, or in other sense an experienced materials writer conducts a concurrent verbalization while designing a task. So verbalization means whenever you are having the action word. So whenever you are doing some things, that was what we refer as verbalization while designing a task. So you are designing a task, and your actions and so your materials are doing by itself. It is taking action. So by reading your article or by going through your article, you learners are moving forward to develop their language skill, not learning but language skill. And then those uh, writers creates a new activity for the specified target learners. So every time we need to focus on the target learners, we need to identify their needs. So for the target learners, the writer will be designing for the target learners, and he or she will be designing based on the needs, and he or she will be predicting and solving practical problems. So what kind of problems? For example, the language content might be too difficult, so the content you have developed for your learners, it might be not up to their mark. Maybe they are way behind, and considering the content, or the difficulty, maybe in the sense of sentence structure or vocabulary. Maybe there are too many unknown words, maybe there are too complex sentence. So that those could be the problems. And the task might be too easy. You have given some task which is very easy, and the students have done it without understanding the text, without understanding the passage. So that could be the problem. So as a experienced material writer, you will predict the problem, and you will solve those practical problems as well. And then develop a framework. The materials writer will develop a framework, but it is driven by practical considerations of what the learners are likely to do, rather than by any considerations of language acquisition principles. So you will make a framework of your material, but The basis of that material will be from the practical consideration, whether the learners are going to do that or not, whether the learners are acquiring and language by these materials or not, because you already know that if you learning if you have learned your language uh, through acquisition, it will be staying for a lot, and you will have better understanding, and you can communicate in a better way. So what should drive materials? Drive materials, by referring this particular phrase, drive materials, we want to say why we need to develop materials. What's the goal? What's the objective of that? So here we have some comments, and these slides are taken and from the book developed edited by Brian Tomlinson, the textbook number 3. You can find it in there. I have given you the chapter, so you can easily find that. I have just quoted it from there. An Italian secondary school teacher said that the teacher said that I have noticed that the course book I use does not seem to deal with the real English. Real English means the English the people use in their daily life, in their real life. So the school teacher finds the lackings of that particular English, real English. So that's his or her issue. Okay. Okay, then we have another issue by Danish upper intermediate student on a full-time intensive course in a British school. So he's from Denmark, and the student is from Denmark, and he or she is learning English from a British school. And this is what he or she says: my demand is becoming a reporter of the English football, and I need so much familiarity. That means this particular learner has some specific objective. He needs some specific English, or maybe we can say some register. He wants to be a reporter of the English football, so he or she needs to have those kinds of English, those sentences. That's why we are referring about corpus. If you remember, some bank of authentic text, maybe maybe some maybe a whole newspaper on English football would be a corpus for him or her, and if he or she could start it from that point, she or he could be doing well. So, but as he or she has represented or focused this kind of situation, that means the textbook or the course book doesn't have those kind of English. And then Croatian Evening Institute teacher, so another teacher, the textbook my institute has written says that you use please and would for simple requests and would you mind for more polite requests. I have heard lots of other things such as could you possibly. So for having request, the basic thing is that please and would you mind, but there are lots of ways to uh, to to produce a request, like as could you possibly. So this particular teacher needs the access of those kinds of English, but he doesn't have that. And then Argentinian part-time student on a low intensity course in Britain, low intensity course. So the problem is that I get very confused with all these knots and zeros and nothings in new languages. So we know that in English we have knots, we have zeros, and we have nothings. But everything is every word is different from another. But it doesn't. He or she doesn't know about that. So if he or she had the access of those kinds of English, that would have been better for him or her. And then experienced school teacher from the Ivory Coast. Here she says it's a very nice book and very lively, but in the section on processes, for example, all the exercises are about unusual things for your country, for our country. We are a hot country and also have many Muslims. The exercises are about snow, ice, coal mornings, water cisterns, writing and publishing EFL books, and making wine. I can tell you, I cannot do making wine and smoking pot in my country. So this kind of situation can be compared with our context as well. In Bangladesh, we can see similar kinds of issues. For example, the book, maybe the Headway one, or maybe some other books which you can find for developing your English language skill. So you can find lots of the things which is not culturally appropriate in your country, like what this particular teacher said in his or her experience. So you need to have these kinds of things as well. So for example, I have seen lots of pictures which makes our students embarrassed in some of our contents, in some of our English language learning books. So we cannot produce that, we cannot see that, we cannot teach that uh, uh, in our culture. It will not be socially accepted. And then Brazilian teacher of English in school, and Brazilian teacher says previous materials were not based on life in Brazil, which is why I don't think they worked very well. So here again we are talking about the culture. If you want to understand the language, you want to have the culture as well, and the students could not relate what they have learned or read or have written from the previous materials. And here one Iraqi students in mixed nationality class using materials designed to practice as a reading narrative. He or she says, "Sir, what is opera?" Okay, what is opera? He or she doesn't know opera. I don't know whether you know it or not. In my real classroom, somebody says, "Sir, opera is a browser." Okay, opera is a browser. Some talks about opera house, but opera is a form of singing, is one kind of singing. Okay, so what will be the framework? Um, the the writing developed by Jolly and Bolito uh, in the book edited by Brand Tomlinson, and here this framework was developed. First one is identification of need of materials. That means why we are developing that materials, why we need that materials, we need to identify that, and then we need to explore that need. So that's why we are having this one, exploration of need. And then contextual realization of materials, whether that particular material is contextualized or not, whether it has a context or not. And then pedagogical realization of materials, whether that particular material can be um, uh, is it prepared for teaching. Whenever we are referring as pedagogical realization, so we are referring at at, at, at teaching. And the production of materials, okay, the materials we have produced, so we need to look at that as well. So whether it is possible for all of us to produce in a bigger version for all of the learners or not. And then student use of materials, then the students will use the materials and they will have their feedback as well. And then evaluation of materials against agreed objectives. So based on the objective where the teacher or the material developer developed the material, we need to evaluate that material as well in order to match the objectives. So here is the model. You can find it in the book as well, page number 113. First one is identification by teacher or learners of a need to fulfill or problem to solve by the creation of materials. First, we need to identify the need of the learners, and then uh, 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 we need to identify the problem, and we need to solve it by developing the material. Then we need to have the exploration of the area of need problem in terms of what language, what meanings, what functions, what skills, etc. And then contextual realization of the proposed new materials by the finding of suitable ideas, context or text. That's what we say. Pedagogical relations of materials by the finding of appropriate exercises and activities, and the writing of appropriate instructions for use. We said it earlier as well. We need to find it whether it is appropriate in teaching positions whenever you are going to teach. For example, you will be having exercises, you will be having activities, you will be having tasks. So whether the students will be able to do that, whether the material is prepared for the introduction to the learners. And then physical production, that's what we are referring as physical production of materials, is consideration the layout, type, size, visuals, reproduction, tape length, etc. So that means whether the volume of the material is low or not, whether it will be accessible by the learners, whether the learners will be able to buy this book or collect the book from closed sources or not. So those will be referred under the framework, and using the classroom, of course, in the next one as well. So here is the process. We are referring the process of material writing. So you need to start from the identification. So as a teacher, this is your path. This is your path through the production of a new or adapted material. So if you are a teacher, if you want to develop a materials, so these are the path. So these lines refers as the dynamic path, and this one is refers as the optional steps and feedback loop. So you can go back and forth for developing the material as well. That's what we are saying. First you need to identify, then you need to explore, and then you need to add the contextual realization, then the pedagogical realization, because as a teacher you are going to teach it, and then you need to produce the materials, and then you need to look how the students are using the material, and then after observing students use of materials, you need to evaluate your materials and find out whether the objectives match with the evaluation or not, and then you will go back again with the identification or need of further materials. So here we will be having a case study. So case study refers that we are having a particular session, we are having particular section, and we will be looking very closely on that section, and we'll try to identify. This is the principle that we have seen earlier, the same thing in the diagram as well. Identification by a teacher of learners of a need to fulfill a problem. So first we will need to identify. So that's the first stage, identification of need. So in real situation, what we have seen, the example is taken from the materials produced for a class at upper intermediate level. So now we are looking at a class of upper intermediate level, and we are looking the materials which was produced for them. And first is that in a reading text, students come across the sentence, "It's time the Prime Minister listened more carefully to his critics." So students face the problem on this particular sentence. I hope you have already understood or already explored the problem. The problem is that here it is referred as it is, that means in present form, but here it is referred as listen in its past form. So that's what the problem is, that they are puzzled by the apparent clash between the past form and the actual meaning of the verb listened. They ask for an explanation and further examples. So if you want to develop a material, you need to identify these kinds of needs, these kinds of problems, and you need to explore about the problems of these categories. So that's the basic thing. So let's go with the next stage. Exploration of language. Now we need to explore what language, what meanings, what functions, or what skills we need to develop in that particular section. So here is the example. The teacher promises to respond and consult practical English uses on its time. So its time is referring as the practical response, practical English uses, and a couple of other pedagogic grammars to get a cross section of views on hypothetical meanings. So what the material developer or material writer will do, he or she will make couple of other pedagogic grammars in there to have a cross-section views for on hypothetical meaning. So what does it mean? What do we understand by its time? So the examples will be there, and you will have pedagogical exploration that he or she needs about pedagogic grammar. He or she needs to introduce pedagogic grammar. So the contextualization, of course, about suitable ideas, context, or text with which to work. So let's see what the teacher did. The teacher decides to produce worksheets on hypothetical meaning to try to anchor the concept and the related language in students' minds, and decides to provide simplified context for practice based in students' own day-to-day experience rather than on external text sources. The worksheet is for class use to reinforce actual teaching. The names used in step 3 of the worksheet are those of students in the class and of a co-teacher. So the thing is that whenever the teacher explored the situation, and he referred or produced worksheets on hypothetical meaning, that means what you are going to is time. So what does that mean? Is time. So he or she refers this kinds of thing to anchor the concept and related language in students' minds, and decides to provide simplified context for practices. So he introduced day-to-day experience for the learners. So it's time to do what? For example, you are in a classroom. Consider yourself in a real classroom. So, for example, you didn't understand the previous slide. So you say that, sir, I did not understand that. Then I say that it's time to open your book. It's time to open your book. So you will understand the form is time. The teacher tried to use or introduce these kinds of sentences which are produced or used in a real life context. So he or she will be developing those contexts, and by having this context, students will understand the hypothetical meaning of those forms of language. And then pedagogical realizations, we know that pedagogical realizations of materials is referred by finding of appropriate exercises, whether the learners are or whether the learners find those exercises appropriate or not, and the activities as well, whether those activities is doing well for the learners, whether they can understand the instructions and the activities as well or not, and the writing of appropriate instructions, whether uh, they understand the instructions or not. So this will be all considered under pedagogical realization. And what we can see in here, the teacher decides on a contrastive approach, facts versus hypothesis. So first we need to understand what is fact and what is hypothesis. Fact is the truth, the real thing, and hypothesis what you guess that might not be true, but you can guess based on the other context. For example, I have seen that in last year we have rain in the early of August, and this is the month of August, and I have seen lots of clouds and air and gloomy weather there. So I can hypothesize that today it might rain. So that is what we are referring at is as hypothesis. That might not be true as well. So the teacher decides on a contrastive approach, initially with an exercise focusing on the distinction and on the verb forms involved step 1. Enough examples are provided to establish a patterns for students to work from. For example, he says that in earlier slides we have seen that the practices are limited. For example, the reporter who wants to be the student who wants to be a reporter of English football, he or she doesn't have much practices on there. So as a material writer, you need to produce enough materials for practice for your learners. Once basic notions are recognized, communicative functions of sentences involving hypothetical meaning are elicited. So whenever the students will understand the basic notions, then communicative functions will be involved. The focus is on unspoken meaning and speaker's attitude. The teacher provides references for further practice or study. So then the particular book or material will focus on the unspoken meaning, the meaning which is not implied in the sentences, or the meaning which was not introduced or explicited on speaker's attitude. So the teacher will provide further references. Maybe the teacher will give you the references of another book or another worksheet or another exercises. So if you think that you did not understand in this section, then you can and read further, and you can study further, and you can understand that. And then the physical production, we know that we are talking about the size, visual production, tape length of the material. So if we are talking about the worksheet is produced as a Word document, photocopied and distributed to learners. So in the case study, we can find that the worksheet is produced as a Word document, and it can be photocopied and distributed to the learner. So it is easily accessible. For example, if I give you a material of maybe 200 pages, so it will be very difficult for you to make a photocopy for all of those sheets and try to understand. On that will be a problem for distribution to your other classmates as well. So we need to look at the physical productions as well. And the use, we are referring as the students use, whether the students using the material, they find it effective or not, or meeting their needs or not. So in here, in the example, we find that there is an introduction in class, followed by completion of the worksheets at home and checking in the next class. So that's what we find in the use. So the learners have the introduction of this particular material, and they have completed the worksheets at home, and in the next class they evaluated whether they have correct answers or not. So the evaluation will be evaluating while developing the material to, or introducing the material to the learners. We'll evaluate whether our material allows us to deal in a concrete way with the reasons for the failure of language materials and provide us with clues to their improvement both during the writing and after the use. So we need to understand, we need to hypothesize the problems, and we need to produce the solution as well from the part of material development. So here is the example: student comments and difficulties with the worksheet. For example, number one, in step one, there is a fact and a hypothesis in the sentence. It's confusing. The sentence, the teacher back to pedagogical realization and led to the change instructions and underlining. So first, the material writer produced this sentence, it's confusing, and then he had the pedagogical realization, then he led to the change instructions. Can't the if sentence also be positive? Do they only express regret? The students had noticed an important oversight which took the teacher back to the exploration stage and led to the conclusion of two further examples in step 2 of the revised version of the worksheet. So you can have a pause in this particular section and go back. Yes, you can go back to the process diagram, the process of material writing diagram, and you can find that the stages can be rebrowse. Yes, can be rebrowsed. For example, this here, the first stage is identification, and next stage is exploration. Then you can go to the pedagogical realization, but here you can find that after going pedagogical realization, the teacher moved back to the exploration stage. So it can be possible, and the teacher did based on the experiences as he or she faced in a context, in a teaching context. And then teacher noted problems with "I wish you would finish" versus "I wish you had finished." So the learners have problems between "I wish you had finished" versus "I wish you had finished," would versus had, and those based on those explanation, and the teacher produced a follow-up worksheets on possible versus impossible wishes. So first one is, it is possible you would finish, so that means it is a possible wish. At whenever we're referring it as a "I wish you had finished," then it is impossible wish based on the conditionals. You know about the conditionals, so it is impossible wish. And last one, the class liked step 3 and enjoyed making up similar sentences about other members of the group. I said earlier that this is a class experience, this is a real life class experience, and the material developer uh, produced these things from a case study, and he or she found that the class liked step 3, that means this one, producing and sentences on I wish versus I wish you had versus I wish you would, and they have produced similar kinds of sentences which made them a lots of practices. So that means that that's the evaluation from the part of that material. So if you want to develop a digital language learning material, if you want to develop a material which can be introduced digitally, so McDonough, Shaw and Mashura in 2013 says that mobile technologies, wireless networking, increasingly compact computers such as palm tops, maybe the smartphones we are talking about, maybe the laptops, tabs, are all representative of the ways in which technology has become potentially integral to our lives. So you know that in the present situation as well, the pandemic situation, we have cornered ourselves in our house. We cannot go outside, but we cannot stop learning. So we are learning, and we are learning from distant situation. I am here in one place and you are learning from another place. So that's why we need to produce some digital material, as you can have access from any part of this world. So that's what we are doing, and that happened because of the potential integral of technology in our lives. We have technological attachments, and in our wish, or it might not be our wish as well, but still we are having the attachments with the technologies. And then we have this particular survey report, the teachers who don't adopt technology, and these are the reasons: extent of the curriculum that needs to be covered during the year. So the curriculum is huge, so that cannot be produced in a digital platform, so that's why they do not adopt technology. Time constraints, so there are time limitations to produce these kinds of materials. I know you might not agree, but I needed a lot of time to produce such kinds of materials. I need to look at these things, I need to produce those things, I need to organize those things, I need to have the layout. You can see these different layouts in every class. So I have done this, and it needs a lot of time, it needs time required for preparing ICT based activities as well. Yes, for example, if I give you some activities, you need to prepare it digitally. You cannot just take a pen and write on your script. You need to prepare in your computer or in your smartphones, and you need to write in a text document. So it needs lots of preparation. Availability of infrastructure, yes, infrastructure is important. That's what we are facing, like as the internet connection, maybe some gadgets, some learners can be faced of lots of problems with the gadgets, because the technology can be a real headache sometimes, because the machines can have problems anytime. Amount of quality content, yes, you might not find quality content in the internet, or maybe the online copies, soft copies. So you need to produce your own materials. So because of the lack of quality content, the teachers might not adopt technology. Lack of in classroom teacher support, yes, in classroom teacher support, yes, sometimes the teachers do not get proper support from the authority, maybe from the learners, from the other contexts as well. So that actually hinders to adopt technology. Lack of participation of teachers in decision making, yes. Whenever you try to make a decision whether you are going to do it or not. For example, if you talk about me, I give very few, I should say, uh, digital materials to my students. I rarely contact with my students through emails, but now we have to do that. We are almost bound to do so. So maybe the participation of teachers, there is lacking some participation of teachers in decision making about whether we are doing it or not. So that might not be helpful for developing digital language learning material. And need for professional development. Yes, of course, you need professional development as well. As a teacher, you need to develop professionally. You need to develop your works both digitally and outside of your desktop or laptop as well. And this is a survey, national survey in one European country, and survey was referred as CARDET in 2009. So here is the Bayes actions model in developed in 1995. Though this model was not focused on language learning, just for teaching and learning, just for any learning, but we can produce that for language teaching material as well. First one, we need to have access. We need to find whether that particular technology or that particular material, soft material, can be accessible to the learners or not. And then the cost, whether the cost of the technology or the material uh, is costly or not. We need to look at that. There's the very fast thing, and these things we have lots of issues referring internet and gadgets as well. We do not have proper gadgets to apply, so there are lots of the problems in there. So we need to ensure it for developing digital language learning material as well. Teaching and learning, what kinds of learning are needed? What instructional approaches will be best meet these needs? What are the best technologies for supporting this teaching and learning? So you need to answer those questions as well for developing good material as well. Interactivity and user friendliness, whether your material is interactive or not, it is user friendly or not, you need to have close observation on that. Organizational issues, whether your organization is supporting you to develop those kinds of materials as in online and offline as well, you need to look at that as well. And whether those materials are accessible to the learners as well, we have shown this information earlier. Novelty, how new is the technology? If it could be in both ways. If it is a new material, then there will be lots of attraction as well. And at the same time, you need to understand, as it is a new technology, then and you need to understand whether your students already have those kind of technology or not. So if they are not familiar with the technology, that will be a total failure. Speed, how quickly can courses be mounted with the technology? How quickly can materials be changed? So whether you have the scope to change or edit your materials or not, or how efficient or effective your material uh, for material to introduce or produce to your learners, to your students. You need to uh, identify those as well. And this is the model. If you follow this model, you can prepare a digital language learning material. Okay, so based on these two sections and the materials that I provided, so now the question for you is that can you prepare a digital material or not? So let me uh, just inform me in the forum. Tell me whether you can produce a digital material or not. So these are the references I used. Three books. All these books are uploaded. Okay, no, not all these books, not this one, but you can find this is material I have uploaded in here. So questions. I know this is a very critical one because you are going to develop a material which is for you learners who are going to learn English language. So definitely you need to look a lot of the things. That's why I said earlier that teaching profession is a very complex one. You need to have lots of concentration, you need to have lots of attention, and you need to be more conscious for everything, from developing material to know how to develop materials as well. So if you have any questions, please do ask in the forum. So thank you very much. So from the last few classes, uh, uh, the narration is very long, so it seems um, very stressful for you. It might be very stressful for you, but you know you're the future teacher, so you need to take the stress. so, so take stress and uh, and prepare yourself for a teacher, at least for this class. Thank you very much.